Maybe I'm just a fool in love. But I'm right about you. And I'm going to help you get the life you deserve. I need to figure out a way to see this through. Whatever it is.
Yeah, that's not creepy at all. Hey guys, and welcome to Film Study, where we analyze films in various ways to make you see it in a different concept. With the release of Season 3 of Netflix's well-awaited hit show, You, of course behind the recent Squid Game series, it honestly took me by surprise, especially the ending scene of the last episode. Before we move forward though, I do want to give a spoiler warning, as I will be going into detail within all of these episodes from this season and prior. Also, if you haven't already, I would very much appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss another video. Now with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into today's topic, which is between Joe and Love, who is crazier? Or in other words, whose actions are more sensible, meaning chosen in accordance with wisdom or prudence and likely to benefit. Now the word benefit probably would fit either of them whatsoever, considering they both got away with everything they did, for now at least. To start off, we first need to fully understand exactly what the word crazy means. According to the official Webster Dictionary, the essential meaning is having or showing severe mental illness or unable to think in a clear or sensible way. We also need to understand the reason Joe and Love is this way. The term crazy stems from an existing mental illness. You're not just born being that way. In the first season of You, we learned that he is extremely observant, looking at every little detail and creating something out of it, and assuming things about everyone he meets or almost everyone he lays eyes on. We see this from the first few milliseconds on the very first episode.
Based on your vibe, student. Your blouse is loose. You're not here to be ogled, but those bracelets, they jangle. You like a little attention, okay.
With the entire series being voiced over by Joe, we get to learn more about him, not only from his behavior, but from his mind as well. As he is reading people, he masks his real emotions, but does it in a way that almost looks like he's not faking anything. When he eventually finds Beck's address, he begins to stalk her, of course from a very far distance. Now yes, if you knew you were being watched at every given moment, that would be terrifying. But with all the things he does, even going as far as sneaking into her apartment, he does not harm her. It's illegal, don't get me wrong, but he does no real harm to her specifically. His intentions are to protect her. This is what's also known as an attachment issue, not just obsession. He's in dire need of a relationship, not just any kind, but one that's as close as you can get it. It's almost like that love at first sight saying, but with a little bit of a twist. Even with the disappearance of Benji and Peach, they were subtle with the intentions of protecting Beck. Joe even said,
"Why would I want to kill him? Who wants to kill people?"
For mentioning what I said previously, Joe not only watches people, but by doing so, he can sense danger upon the people that he cares about, like Peach being self-centered towards Beck and Benji. One thing we have to remember is that Joe does save her life at the train station when Beck stumbles onto the tracks.
Your hand, now!
In the second episode of Season 1, we have the incident with Benji. Now you really have to pay attention to this one because Joe's reasoning for his actions stems from Benji hurting Beck, someone who he, may be obsessed with at the moment but has developed an attachment to. In his own subconscious, he says,
"So I did what I had to do to help you.
And
Worst case, that ends with prison time. Not an option."
his intention was to get a confession and information out of Benji, and in knowing what he has and has done, yes, he does technically end up getting rid of him using his peanut allergy, knowing he was deathly allergic. However, it was from his information that he declared it the right thing to do for Beck's protection. Another thing to point out here is Beck also Googled him as well, so he's not the only one. This day and age, it is kind of normal to do so in a way because you never really know who someone is. Ironic, isn't it? When it comes to Peach, this is a completely different story. See, Peach is found out to be Beck's stalker, or other stalker, I guess you could say. But there are differences between Joe and Peach. Peach has collected a few hundred pictures of Beck. No, not for blackmail, but because she's in love with her. Joe picks up on this and uses this as another reason to protect Beck. A recovering Peach is staying with Beck, and she banishes Joe. Joe explains to Beck that Peach is in love with her and trying to keep Beck dependent on her. After stalking Peach at an event, she discovers Joe in the house and pulls a gun on him. She accuses him of stalking her, and Joe reveals all he knows about her. They wrestle for it, and Peach is gone. Joe types a note on her computer, leading detectives to believe that it was by her own actions. His intentions for getting rid of anyone is non-existent. It just happened with Peach. Then comes the conversation starter with Candace, one of Joe's previous relationships. Even during a flashback of her, he morally says, "I'm sorry." We learn that Candace cheated on Joe and later left him, telling him she never loved him. In an attempt to restore their love, Joe kidnapped her and drove her to a remote area where they had previously spent time together. He presented her with a picnic and tried to reason with her that they should continue their relationship. When she tried to run and fight back against him, he slammed her head, knocking her out. Believing he killed her, he buried her in a shallow grave topped with flowers and left. She woke up, crawled out of the dirt, and went to a police station to report the incident. Since she had no evidence of her claims that he had tried to get rid of her, there was nothing that they could do. Now, with Candace's story, this could be a bit more controversial behavior. However, you have to remember the point here. Candace technically played Joe, saying she doesn't love him and never did. So in this moment, Joe feels betrayal, something that he knows all too well. By the end of season 1, Joe has a lot to run away from, which is why he ends up in Los Angeles come season 2. Joe can put miles between himself and his problems, but they'll still follow him. Why? Because he's his own biggest problem. Wherever Joe goes, his criminal behavior isn't far behind. In season 2, we get introduced to Love, and Candace makes a return, following Joe this whole time. She tries to tell Love the truth about Joe, but Joe sides with him when he tells her Candace is just his crazy ex. The big twist at the end of the season is that Love is also similar to Joe. She takes out Delilah and Candace, and when Joe finds out about it, he goes after her himself, but then she tells him she's pregnant with his baby, so he doesn't follow through. Joe and Love end up moving to a house in suburban California where they plan to start their family. But in the final moments of the scene, we see Joe staring at a woman next door. This rolls us into the 3rd season. Before we get into that though, I wanted to talk about that glass box that has been a symbol within the show. First, how on earth was he able to disassemble it and move it to LA? I guess we can narrow it down to movie logic. Throughout the series, up to this point, the end of season 2, Joe has caged a total of 5 people, of which 2 got to escape. What's interesting though is during the first couple episodes, Joe didn't have the intention of the box being what the audience knows of it now. At first, Joe willingly takes Karen's friend Claudia to the box without hesitation to help, and begins to kind of freak out from flashbacks from what had just happened prior with Benji in season 1. On the other hand, Love is another story. She admits to being similar to Joe as she takes out Delilah to protect him. This is where we see the crazier side of her, referring to him as passionate and devoted. Yeah, no. Going into season 3 is where we really get to know how Love is with Joe as they now have a child together. Right in the first episode, Love goes after their neighbor Natalie from finding a box of her belongings hidden at their house which she knew was from Joe. See, this is where the reasoning is very different between Joe and her. Love doesn't think of the causes of her actions. Afterwards, she calls Joe in a panic and basically just instructs him to clean up the mess. When he steps into the scene, interestingly enough, he includes his name into it like he had a part of it specifying that Love signed a lease for our crime scene. Of course, he's done this before, so he knows exactly what to do, and he does it to protect the family, not for her, but for the family as a whole, meaning so Henry doesn't have to grow up without a parent, or in this case, neither of them, since he technically could just turn her in. But for her sake, decides not to. Also, Love decides this is the perfect time to bring up Candace, when this is an entirely different situation considering the reasoning behind Love's intentions with Natalie, compared to Candace and Joe. Joe is more sane and in the right than with Love. He defends himself and gives regards to others, accumulating all of the seasons. When something happens, he panics, continuously saying this isn't him, he didn't do it. From when he was a child, he came from a traumatic experience that made him repeat history. Love just straight up goes for it. If anything, I think she should have been caught a long time ago, and would have if she didn't have Joe to help her cover everything up. With his actions, he acts defensively, not in a selfish way, but literally as a defense mechanism, to protect himself because she knows his past and could turn him in. As Love continues on with her little spree she has going on, her and Joe trap Carrie and Sherry in the book vault, to which they actually escape and go on to publish a book about their survival story. By the end of season 3, Joe ended up faking his disappearance and left his son behind to start his life again. During an interview with Bustle, the creator of the show, Sarah Gamble, opened up about how Joe was able to come to a place of realization when it came to being a father to son Henry. Netflix also announced a season 4, which will continue Joe's life. As Joe settles into his life in Paris, his obsession with Marianne will continue, according to Gamble. That's why he's there, she shared with E! News. What's a completely different kind of environment to put him in? And then also, what haven't we done that could potentially get him into lots of trouble? I think that's a bit of insight and growth for Joe, that he's able to recognize at the end of the season that he maybe isn't the best parent at the moment.
I worked so hard for you.
For you.
I could walk through fire for you.
But what do you think of Joe? Did he have potential and right within his actions? And what are you most anticipated about with the next season to come? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below.